In the restless city of Akanta, where billboards threw neon color over traffic like festival confetti, Kunnel wore his success the way other men wore cologne, loud enough for the room to notice. He was barely in his mid-30s, already managing a cluster of companies that fed his appetite for control. The man loved chrome-fresh cars, imported suits that whispered when he moved, and handshakes that came with cameras. He walked as if the pavement owed him gratitude. People called it confidence. Those closer to him understood it as a hunger with no bottom. Behind the satin curtains and imported rugs, a quieter story paced in circles. Zara, his wife of 7 years, lived in the same mansion like a bird that had forgotten how to sing. She was soft-spoken, graceful, beautiful in a way that calmed a room rather than set it on fire. Her warm brown skin and thoughtful eyes carried a constant question. When? Each month came with its ritual of waiting, prayers scribbled into midnight, and a silence that felt heavy enough to bruise. The answer never changed. No child. And with each passing month, Kunnel's patience thinned like the gold on a counterfeit ring. That night, the storm that had rumbled for years decided to break. The house was too quiet. Even the air seemed to brace itself. Zara sat at the edge of their bed, fingers knitted tight as if she could hold herself together by force. Kunnel came in with his tie undone, irritation hanging on his face like sweat. 7 years, Z, he spat, tossing his keys onto the dresser so they clanged like a gavel. 7 years of nothing. Do you want me to go to my grave without an heir? Zara raised her gaze slowly. Kunnel, we have tried. I have tried. Maybe we should see another specialist. Maybe there's still room for a miracle. Her voice wobbled and steadied, a reed that refused to snap. Miracle, he laughed, but the sound was made of glass. My mother asks me every day why you have not given me a son. My friends joke behind my back. Do you know what it is to be mocked as a man without a child? He paced, prowling the carpet. You've turned me into a spectacle. Please don't say that. Her eyes shone. We vowed before God better or worse. Don't fling your pain at me like stones. What is a woman who cannot bear? He fired back, voice lifting. You live off my table, my roof, my car. And still you cannot give me one child with my name. Zara, you are a curse. Her lips trembled, but she held her ground. Don't call me that. I've cried until the cupboard of tears is empty. I pray until dawn splits. Do you think this gives me joy? I'm hurting too. He turned from her, as if her grief offended him. Enough. I won't waste my life waiting. I'll speak to my lawyer in the morning. This marriage is over. The word hit her like thrown stone. Divorce? After everything? After I stood with you when your wallet was thin and your dreams were theories? Kunnel, have you eaten memory for breakfast? What we had, does it mean nothing? Love doesn't produce sons, he said, jaw tight. My mother was right. I should have ended this long ago. I need a wife who can fill a house with laughter, not silence. He pointed to the door without looking at her. By tomorrow, I want you gone. Zara slid from the bed to her knees, clutching his trouser hem, the dignity of a woman giving way to the desperation of a wife. Please, give us time. God can still answer. He kicked free a small, cruel motion. God has nothing to do with this. You are the problem. Leave. That's final. The argument pulsed through the corridors. Staff gathered in quiet clusters, eyes lowered, mouths tight. Zara tried one last time, standing with tears threading down her face. Look at the woman who cooked for you, who washed your clothes, who prayed over your sick days. Don't throw me away like market trash. His heart was stone. He dialed in front of her. Barrister? Draw the papers. I want it done now. She leaves tomorrow. Zara stared, disbelieving. You planned this. You're a burden, he answered. I'm freeing myself. Pack tonight. Her body felt hollowed by a blunt knife, but she walked to the wardrobe and folded dresses that were stitched with memories, birthdays, church pews, quiet dinners that once felt sacred. The zip on the small bag stumbled. Her hands shook too hard to guide it. Kunnel watched with arms crossed. Not once did he move. Not once did he soften. At the door, she turned. You'll regret this, she whispered, voice breaking but clear. One day, truth will look you in the face. He studied the window. She was already invisible. Zara stepped into the night with a bag and a vow. The house behind her shrank into cold marble. The city hummed, uncaring. She walked past shuttered shops, drowsy dogs, the last of the market women tying up their earnings. No one knew the woman whose life had cracked open was passing them by. She whispered to herself as if God were walking beside her. I may leave empty, but I won't stay broken. The only door that made sense at that hour was Lola's. They had shared dormitory snacks, exam fears, and secrets big enough to anchor a friendship for life. When Zara knocked, the clock was flirting with 10. Lola opened in a wrapper in shock. "Z, what, did someone die?" She didn't finish. Zara fell into her arms, and that was enough explanation. Inside the small flat, the world steadied. "Talk to me," Lola said, pushing a cup of water into Zara's hands. The words crawled out. He had thrown her out, called her a curse, blamed her womb for 7 years of waiting. Lola's jaw clenched until the muscles jumped. He never even checked himself, did he? Zara shook her head. He said there was nothing to check. Lola hissed softly. "That man's pride is a second skin." "You'll sleep here," Lola said, no debate in it. "For as long as you need. My house is your house." The night felt like it had corners again. Still, Zara woke to a pillow full of tears. Morning drew a thin line of light across the floorboards. Grief drew a heavier one inside her chest. Days layered themselves. Zara sat by the window often, staring at a city that never stared back. Food lost its taste. Language lost its cut. Lola made jokes, then made tea, then made space when humor stopped working. One afternoon she tried strategy. "Come with me to the market. Fresh air is therapy." Zara shook her head. "What if someone asks about him?" Lola rolled her eyes. "You'll tell them a fool traded a diamond for gravel." A week later, Lola changed tactics. "Z, have you ever had a full fertility workup?" Zara blinked. "Me?" "Yes, you," Lola said. "Proper tests. Not whispers in a living room." Zara's voice thinned. He wouldn't hear of it. He declared the verdict, and we lived under it. Lola stood. "No more living under bad verdicts. We're going to Sunrise Medical Center tomorrow. You'll hear from science, not from pride." They went. Dr. Okoro, soft-spoken and older than the worry lines on their faces, listened first. Then came blood draws, scans, quiet rooms, loud machines. The waiting gnawed, but Zara held a thread of peace between thumb and finger. When they returned 2 days later, Dr. Okoro adjusted his glasses and smiled the kind of smile that closes a wound. "Madam Zara, your reproductive health is excellent. Hormones, ovulation, structure. Everything checks out. From our findings, there's no issue here." The word nothing had never felt this holy. Zara exhaled a sob that sounded like a song. Lola sprang from her chair, triumphant. "I knew it. He made you carry his shame." Dr. Okoro's eyes were kind. "If there was no pregnancy in 7 years, I recommend your former husband be evaluated. But please carry no more blame on your back. When the right season and the right man meet you, you can have children." They left the hospital into a light that suddenly looked warmer. Outside, on a bench where tired people usually scrolled their phones, Zara stared at the sky and pressed both palms to her face. "All these years," she whispered, "I begged God to fix me. I was not the one." Lola squeezed her hand. "One day he'll look you in the eye and drown in the truth he refused." The weeks after that were a slow rising. Zara helped Lola with her tailoring, hemming uniforms, pinning Ankara patterns to mannequins, relearning the rhythm of being useful. She slept more, ate real meals, even laughed when a stubborn zip fought back. One evening she surprised herself. "I want to start something," she said, stirring stew in Lola's kitchen. "A small food stand. I've always cooked like someone's grandmother." Lola beamed. "Then let's turn your talent into rent." They set up on Lola's veranda. Mornings smelled like firewood and promise. Smoky jollof, beans that softened exactly on time, moin that peeled from its leaves in perfect shapes. By 7, office workers queued with sleepy gratitude. They learned her name as a flavor first, then as a person. One man said, "Madam, you've started glowing." She smiled, a small, private victory. Nights still had ghosts, but they rattled less. Sometimes she asked fragile questions. "Do you think he ever loved me?" Lola chose honesty. "I think he loved himself more. But you are learning to love yourself properly." Zara nodded. It didn't erase history, but it made the future less foggy. Somewhere beneath the bruises, a spark had found oxygen. On a Sunday, Lola returned from church with gossip that wore a crown. "Guess who's planning a royal wedding?" Zara kept stirring her soup. "Let me guess, Kunnel." Lola nodded. "New bride from Lagos. People say she glitters. He's inviting mutual friends. Wants the city to witness his happiness." Zara's ladle paused in the pot, then moved again. "He hasn't changed," she said softly. "He will send you an invite," Lola predicted, eyes narrowing. "He likes an audience." Zara's hand rested on her belly. She remembered Dr. Okoro's sentence, "You are healthy." She whispered a prayer that tasted like defiance and honey. "If you saw my tears," she said to heaven, "let truth be my armor." The city woke hungry, and Zara learned it could feed her too. She wiped down the stall, tied her scarf, and let the simmer of tomato and pepper do half the marketing. Life throbbed around her, school kids shrieking, kiki horns complaining, traders bargaining like poets. Her hands moved with prayerful efficiency. She served, smiled, counted change, tried not to graze the old wounds with memory. "Madam, 2 plates," a man's voice said, pleasantly warm. She looked up into kind eyes and a face that carried its calm like a promise. He wore a white shirt tucked into brown trousers and held a small laptop bag that had seen meetings in miles. "Your jollof smells like it wants to start a fight," he joked. "Spicy or normal?" she asked, a reluctant smile tugging. "Spicy. I like my food to fight back." She laughed, the first laugh of the day. He paid, lingered a second, and added, "I'm Teo. I work down the road. Expect me again." She nodded. He left. Some encounters leave echoes. He returned the next day. And the next. Sometimes he bought plantain too. Sometimes he told a 1-minute story that was silly on purpose. He never overstayed. He never pushed. But each time he left, Zara found herself lighter by a few grams. One quiet afternoon, when the rush had calmed, he asked gently, "Do you rest at all?" She wiped her hands. "When I get home." He hesitated. "Do you have help?" "No. But I manage." He nodded, then took a breath. "Forgive me if this is forward, but are you married?" Her heart pinched, then released. "I was." He didn't fill the silence with pity. "I'm sorry," he said simply. Days stitched themselves into something steady. Teo started donating bags of onions, cartons of water, sometimes just a joke that landed well. "Consider it investment in my favorite restaurant," he'd say. Zara told him small pieces of herself. How her mother taught her seasoning like math, how she once dreamed of a real restaurant that smelled like home. One afternoon he sat on a plastic chair beside the stand, hands folded. "I was married," he said softly. "A long time ago. I lost her in a car accident. The world went quiet after that. I haven't tried to love anyone since, until recently." Zara looked at her pot to stop her eyes from filling. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know," he replied. "But I'm not Cunnel. My love has no audience, it has a roof." The sentence found a chair in her heart and sat down. It wasn't instant. Healing rarely is. But coffee became a walk became dinner, and dinner became the unbiased silence of a park bench where 2 people measured their hopes without rushing the scale. "Why me?" she asked one Sunday, her voice small as a pupil. Teo smiled. "Because your peace is quiet, not loud. Because you were broken but didn't stay where you fell. Because you make a pot of rice taste like a reason to keep living." She squeezed his fingers. "Then I want to try too." They married 6 months later in a ceremony that had no choreographed opulence. Only people who would actually show up again tomorrow. Lola danced like she'd won a prize money dash. Teo's kisses were shy at first, then confident in the honesty of them. He helped her expand the food venture into a tidy little shop with a painted sign that made her blush. Each morning he placed a goodbye on her forehead and said, "I love you, my queen." Safety, which had felt like a foreign country, finally stamped her passport. Then her body began telling a new story. She woke nauseated by the smell of stew, tired in a way sleep didn't fix. She called it malaria until Teo cleared his throat and said, "Let's test a beg." The clinic smelled like antiseptic and new beginnings. When the nurse returned, she wore a grin that had fireworks stitched to it. "Madam, congratulations. You're pregnant." The world tilted in the sweetest way. "Pregnant," Zara repeated, as if trying the word on for size. Teo hugged her, laughter cracking into gratitude. "We're going to be parents." The scan day arrived like a parade. The doctor moved the probe, then paused, eyebrows up. "Madam, I'm hearing 3 heartbeats." "3," she squeaked, then squealed, then laughed, then cried all in one breath. At home, Teo actually knelt and cried. "God, you overdid it." Preparation became choreography. A nursery painted in gentle colors, miniature clothes folded like prayers, neighbors arriving with casseroles and advice. Triplet boys entered the world on a Saturday morning, as if they had a train to catch. Nurses clapped, the doctor grinned. Teo looked ridiculous with joy. Zara pressed 3 tiny faces to her chest and whispered, "I am not barren. God has answered loud." News travels at the speed of mouths. People from her old street came to witness the miracle. Whispers braided themselves into narratives, some sharp, some sweet. She had triplets, the same woman he shamed, they said. Zara let history talk to itself. She was busy feeding the future one tiny mouth at a time. Somewhere across Acanta, Cunnel rotated in his leather chair, success stacked around him like trophies, newer cars, shinier suits, fatter accounts. But nights did what nights do. They stripped noise from the room and left the man with himself. He had tried 3 relationships in as many years, none set seed. One woman left with a single sentence: "I won't live like a factory under your mother's supervision." Mama Rahmeth still had a tongue like a whip wrapped in silk. "You care for fashion more than family," she said often. "When I picked Zara, I begged for patience. You chased her away." Cunnel snapped every time. "Don't mention that woman." Yet a whisper wouldn't quit. Where was Zara? Did she remarry? Did she build a life that didn't include his name? One morning, scrolling with idle thumbs, he froze at a photo. A tiny foot in a woman's palm, another photo of small fingers around a thumb that looked familiar. The hand, its skin tone, the curve of the knuckles, pulled at memory. He scrolled faster until denial outran truth. Coincidence, he told himself, and shut the app like you shut a door on a storm. Enter Femi, loyal friend and well-connected gossip antenna. "Guy, there's someone you must meet," he said. Saad. Fresh from Lagos. Fashion house, rich folks, the works. Classy. And she wants a serious man. Cunnel laughed. "You're advertising her like a latest model." "I'm serious. She's different." Cunnel shrugged. "Fine. Said it." Saad was a vision in curated glow. Silky hair, gold nails, a dress that had traveled further than most people. But it was her voice that hooked him. Crisp, assured, the voice of a woman who'd written her own job description. They talked business, travel, what makes a home. He steered to family almost immediately. "I've wanted children forever," he said. "Wrong woman, wrong timing." Saad raised a brow. "You were married, right?" "Yes," he answered quickly. "But she couldn't give me a child." Saad didn't argue. "I want kids too, maybe 3. Cunnel's heart sprinted. Within weeks they were a city event. Matching outfits, front row seats, whispered hashtags. Cunnel showered her with phones, a car, dresses that needed lighting to be fully appreciated. One evening Saad said flatly, "Let's not waste time. If we're serious, let's marry." He blinked at her decisiveness and dialed his event planner like a man booking a stadium. The wedding would be the headline. Red carpets, Rolls-Royce, a live band flown in, guest lists that read like a power index. It wasn't just love, it was a declaration. He wanted the city to see he'd upgraded his life. Somewhere under that desire throbbed a smaller, uglier one. He wanted Zara to see it too. While reviewing seating with his planner, he paused. "Add a name." He wrote Zara Adebayo with a pen stroke that felt like a dare. "Send a first-class invite." "Front row." The planner stared. "Your ex-wife?" He smiled with his mouth, not his eyes. "Yes." Behind Sada's gloss, anxiety gnawed. She had been trying to conceive in secret. Test kits lined a drawer like soldiers waiting for orders. The lines stayed negative. Her mother's voice sneaked in through phone calls. "Are you sure this man isn't the one with the issue?" Saad finally raised it one evening. "Cunnel, should we see a doctor? Just to be sure we're both fine." He flared. "What do you mean by that?" "We've been together months," she started. He cut her off. "You sound like Zara, accusing me." The room tightened. She swallowed her fear and shelved the topic, but it shifted something inside her permanently. The rehearsal day found Cunnel alone in the hall before the noise arrived. Chandeliers blinked approval, roses nodded, gold chairs shone like obedient soldiers. He stared at the printed guest list and found her name again. Old memories slipped in like thieves. Zara arranging his ties, cooking pepper soup when he had fever, crying on their bedroom floor. He shook his head to dislodge the past. "I made the right choice," he told the empty air. Miles away, Zara was bathing one of the boys when Lola's phone buzzed. "Wedding invitation," Lola said, eyes widening. "From who?" Zara asked, toweling a tiny head. "Cunnel." The gold envelope felt like theater. Cunnel and Saad, the royal union. Date. Venue. Dress code. Front row seat, Zara Adebayo. Lola raged on her behalf. "Is he normal? Are we attending his circus?" Zara held her baby closer and did something unexpected. She smiled, calm and precise. "Let him have his wedding." "You're not going," Lola declared. Zara didn't answer. The silence had an outline. Later, Zara stood at the window, invitation in one hand, baby in the other. The card gleamed, so did resolve. He wants me small, she said at last. We'll deprive him of that. Lola folded her arms. So, Zara looked down at her sleeping boys, 3 proofs breathing. We will show him the truth. The plan was executed like choreography. Lola pressed a long sun-yellow gown that Zara had saved for a better day. Not loud, Zara insisted. Peaceful, but undeniable. You'll look like God's footnote, Lola grinned. Matching outfits were ordered for the boys. White shirts, yellow shorts, tiny bow ties. A friend's contact secured a black Rolls-Royce, because if they were coming, they would arrive with punctuation. They rehearsed how the boys would hold her hands. We're not going to fight, Zara reminded. Your presence will do the work, Lola said. Truth is an earthquake. The night before, Teo placed both hands on her shoulders. You don't owe that hall anything, he whispered. I know, she replied. I'm not going for them. I'm going for the woman who survived. He kissed her temple. Whatever you choose, I am beside you. The morning erupted. Hashtags paparazzi. Glittering guests streaming into a waterfront hall that smelled of money and expectations. Inside a hotel room, Saad stared at her reflection, a diamond goddess with a fissure in her heart. He'll fall in love all over again, her best friend said, adjusting the veil. He will, Saad smiled thinly, wishing belief felt less like acting. At the altar, Kunal wore white agbada stitched with gold and restlessness. Femi leaned in. Why are you pacing? Waiting for someone, Kunal muttered. The Rolls-Royce slid to a stop. The back door opened, and Zara stepped out in yellow like Sunrise had learned to walk. Calm face, steady eyes, 3 small boys tethered to her hands like living exclamation points. The hall inhaled and forgot to exhale. Phones lifted. Whispers roared. Is that his ex-wife? Triplets? Kunal left the altar without knowing he'd moved. Zara met his gaze and offered a small, devastating smile. She took her front row seat, the one he'd reserved, without flinching. Her sons clambered into her lap and whispered, Mummy, we made it. She kissed their heads like victory was a quiet thing. Saad entered on cue to a room that had changed temperature. She saw the faces, the phones, the stiff back of her groom. What's happening? She breathed. The pastor coughed into a microphone that was suddenly too loud. Shall we begin? But Kunal's eyes were nailed to 3 small proofs. Lola leaned to Zara. Do we slip out? No, Zara said, voice serene. We'll stay to the end. She hadn't come to ruin anything. She'd come to be seen. And whether anyone spoke or not, the truth had already taken the mic. Silence, thick velvet, and almost holy, settled on the wedding hall as if someone had thrown a blanket over the noise. The choir's hum thinned to a nervous line of feedback, the saxophonist lowered his instrument, and the guests leaned as one body toward the aisle where Zara stood in a gown the color of early sunlight, her 3 boys fastened to her hands like gentle anchors. Even the chandeliers seemed to hold their breath, prisming light onto a scene no planner had designed. Kunal felt the ground tilt beneath his polished shoes. He gripped the edge of the altar as if it were a rail on a suddenly moving train. Who is that? Someone breathed from the back. That's his ex, another voice answered, too loudly, too hungrily. The one he said. The sentence didn't finish because Saad, face veiled and posture perfect, shifted beside Kunal. Her voice was low, but it cut. Kunal, who is she? He glanced at her and swallowed. Zara. And the children? The veil trembled, a bird wing caught in a draft. They're hers, he said, the words squeezing through a throat gone dry. Triplets. Sada's tone rose a half step. You told me she couldn't conceive. You told me she was the reason. Murmurs jumped row to row. A videographer, forgetting discretion, swung his camera toward the front row where Zara eased into the chair deliberately labeled reserved. One child crawled briefly into her lap. She lifted him with a tenderness that hurt to watch. I thought, Kunal started, his gaze torn between the woman at his altar and the woman he had thrown out of another life. I was told. What doctors? Saad demanded, louder now, pivoting to face him. You never showed me results. You never agreed to testing together. Anytime I raised it, you shut me up with pride. Femi stepped forward, hand half raised as if to calm a riot. Saad, please, let's manage this. No, she shook off his gentleness. We will not manage deceit. The pastor, sweating beneath his clerical collar, cleared his throat and tried composure. Beloved shall we. Pastor, Saad said, eyes bright, we shall not beloved anything until we confront the truth standing at the door. Zara rose slowly, turning with the unflustered grace of a woman who had been to hell and learned how to walk there. Her gaze found the altar. She did not look at the guests or the cameras or the lights. She looked at Cunnel, and her voice, when it came, was clear enough to touch the back wall. "You called me barren," she said. "You called me cursed. You let your mother's fear sit on my chest, your friends' jokes echo in our room. You never checked yourself, not once. You never waited for God. You did not hold me, you hurled me." The hush deepened until the room could hear its own electricity. She shifted the smallest boy on her hip. "I left with a bag and a vow," she continued, softer, steadier. "God heard me. He healed me. Not with one child, but 3. Her eyes shone without breaking. "I did not come here to disgrace you. I came to be seen by the truth you refused." Cunnel felt something in him split, a quiet internal rip where arrogance had been stitched too tightly. He wanted to say "I'm sorry," but the mouth that had once thrown careless knives could not form softness quickly enough. He reached a hand toward Sod, an instinct to ground himself in the present. She stepped back. "You invited her to humiliate her," she said, voice trembling with a mix of pain and composure. "But humiliation has a rebound." She lifted her veil with emotion that felt like a verdict and turned to the guests. "If vows are to be truth before God, then let us be truthful. I cannot promise forever to a man whose first language is pride." The bouquet fell from her fingers, petals scattering like small, stunned birds across the ivory aisle. "Please," Cunnel murmured, desperation leaking into his tone. "Don't here, not here." "Here," she replied quietly. "Because you chose here to perform your narrative." She walked. The bridesmaids fluttered behind her like startled butterflies. The planner whispered into a headset that could do nothing, and the choir set their microphones down one by one, as if sound itself were inappropriate. Zara did not gloat. She sat. She drew her children close. She whispered, "We'll leave soon," and smoothed a tiny bow tie that had twisted in the moment. Lola, 2 rows back, pressed her lips together to hold in tears and pride that wanted to spill. The pastor tried again, hands raised as if to bless what no longer existed. "Beloved." But the ceremony had unspooled beyond reach. And in that echoing pause, the city of Acanta learned a lesson it would replay for days. When truth arrives, spectacle sits down. Zara stood, finally, as if obeying a quiet bell only she could hear. She turned, nodded once toward the altar without malice, and began her slow exit. The crowd parted without being told, a living Red Sea making way for a woman and 3 small proofs who needed no permission. Outside, the Rolls-Royce door opened with courteous silence. As she helped the boys in, one asked, "Mummy, did we win?" She kissed his forehead. "We told the truth," she said. "That is the only winning that matters." The car moved. Inside, Zara let herself breathe like a person who had been underwater too long. Her hands shook, then stilled. Lola's message pinged her phone, "Proud of you." She typed back, "God did it." Then she tucked the device away and watched the city slide by, knowing some stories don't end with applause, they end with peace. After the door shut on Sada's heels and Zara's quiet exit, the hall exhaled into chaos. Waiters put down trays that would never be emptied. The band leader, eyes wet, told his men to pack up the talking drums. Photographers argued softly about ethical footage, and then kept filming anyway, because virality is a stubborn employer. In the middle of that expensive storm sat Cunnel, not the gilded groom, but a man stripped to the blueprint. He lowered himself to the edge of the stage, a bada folding awkwardly beneath him. The gold embroidery that had screamed triumph now looked like a joke with a bad punchline. Femi slid beside him and said nothing at first. He had learned that there are silences a friend must keep company with before he offers words. "She came with triplets," Femi finally said, not unkindly, more like a reporter delivering fact. 3. Cunnel covered his face. "I invited her to watch me move on." The sentence was dull, the confession of a thief who can no longer outrun himself. "I know," Femi said. "She didn't cry, Femi. She didn't break." He let his hands fall. She glowed. Femi glanced at the emptied aisle where petals lay like evidence. Truth often glows. Phones began to chirp and vibrate in pockets and bags, a chorus that built into something ugly. Hashtags formed and multiplied. Hashtag the Royal Union morphed into hashtag Truth at the Altar, hashtag Triplets in Yellow, hashtag Pride Before Fall. Clips of Sod lifting her veil and of Zara's steady speech leapt from screen to screen across Acanta, then beyond. "Did you ever get tested?" Femi asked, low, intimate. Cunnel bristled, then sagged. "I didn't need to," he began, but the sentence disintegrated under its own arrogance. "No," he corrected, the word tasting like rust. "No, I didn't. Femi didn't say I told you so," he said. "It's not too late to look truth in the face. But you can't bully it." Later, at home, Mama Rahmath met him at the door with eyes that carried both rebuke and love. "You see pride?" she asked, tapping her chest. "It is sweet in the mouth and bitter in the belly." He dropped into a chair like a felled tree. "Mama, his voice failed. She sat opposite him, hands knotted around a handkerchief that had already done too much work. "I helped you sin against that girl," she said. "I fueled your contempt. May God forgive me first. Then may He teach you how to be small." His phone detonated with messages, investors asking for clarity, a partner suspending a deal, a lifestyle blog requesting a comment to balance the narrative. He turned the device face down, as if it were a living thing that could be shamed. Night refused him sleep. He lay awake replaying rooms. The bedroom where he'd said words that should never be said, the office where he'd boasted, the rehearsal hall where he'd pretended not to remember how Zara smiled when she ironed his cuff, the aisle where Sada's bouquet fell like a judgment. Around 3 a.m., he got up, showered, and watched the mirror fog. When the glass cleared, the man that looked back was one he did not recognize, smaller, older, and for the first time useful. At dawn, he walked into a clinic without an entourage. He filled his own forms. He answered questions about a long-ago infection he had never properly treated because invincibility had seemed easier than antibiotics. The phlebotomist tied a band, found a vein, and drew blood that was just blood. No title, no car model attached. When the results came later that day, the words were clinical and merciless. Low count, low motility. Recommended treatment. Further evaluation. He sat in the parking lot for a long time, results paper softening in his sweaty grip. Birds moved without consulting him. A woman in scrubs laughed into her phone. Somewhere 2 blocks away, a generator coughed into life. The world, unbothered, continued. He exhaled, and it sounded like surrender. That evening, the mansion felt cavernous. Staff avoided his eyes with the etiquette of those who had seen their boss on every screen. In his room, he opened a drawer and found the cufflink Zara once bought him from a street vendor because it looked like stars. He held the silly thing and understood, finally, the poverty of a house where love has been evicted. Zara didn't celebrate. She cooked, because hunger comes whether truth has just won or not. The boys took turns tugging at her scarf while Lola scrolled and read aloud between giggles and gasps. "Listen to this," Lola said, eyes bright. A commenter wrote, "She didn't argue with the lie. She arrived with the truth." Another one says, "That's how God does mic drop." Zara smiled in spite of herself. Let the internet have its dance. "I'm just grateful we got home before nap meltdown." As if on cue, one of the boys rubbed his eyes. She scooped him up, pressed a kiss to a warm cheek, and hummed a tune her mother used to hum when life felt too big. The front door knocked, soft, hesitant. Lola's face shifted, she stood. Who is knocking like conscience? When she opened it, the answer arrived in rumpled linen. Cunnel stood on the threshold, smaller than memory, holding his cap like an apology. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The smell of okra and smoke drifted past him into the corridor like a domestic benediction he no longer had rights to. "Zara," he said, voice sanded down. Lola looked ready to build a wall with her body, but Zara's hand lifted, a gentler stop. "Let him come in." He stepped in, gaze skittering from the family photos on the wall to the small shoes lined at the door. One of the boys peered around the corner, thumb in mouth, unafraid. "Hello," Cunnel managed, and the child blinked and disappeared, the way innocence does when it senses adult weight. "I won't waste words," Cunnel said, standing rather than presuming a seat. "I ruined us. Pride was my god, and I sacrificed you on its altar." The sentence hung between them, neither dramatic nor deflecting. "I said you were barren. I made you carry my shame. I never checked myself." Zara's hands remained folded, the posture of a woman who has learned both restraint and power. Lola, arms crossed, watched like a courtroom auntie. "I went to the clinic this morning," he continued. "I have issues, low count, low motility. Likely from an old infection. I should have treated it. I should have listened. I should have." His voice cracked and he swallowed the debris. "I don't deserve forgiveness. But I needed to say it. I was wrong." Silence stretched, then softened. Zara nodded once, as if a verdict had finally been read. "Your confession does not rebuild the past," she said, not unkindly. "But it releases the future." He looked up. "You're angry?" I was, she said. I kept the anger like a pet. It grew and bit me. Then I let it go. I won't take it back. He exhaled as if he had been braced for a blow and received a bandage. He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him gently. Cunnel. He faced her. I forgive you. The sentence opened a window in the room. Even Lola's shoulders dropped a fraction. Cunnel's eyes glassed. He bent his head, not to dramatize, but because humility had finally found his neck. Thank you, he said, the two words wide enough to hold a lifetime of misdirection. At the door, he paused. They're beautiful, he added softly, glancing toward the room where the boys now giggled, oblivious. You're a wonderful mother. By grace, she said. He left, and Lola closed the door with the solemnity of someone sealing a chapter. You are better than me, she muttered. I would have asked Thunder to audition. Zara laughed, surprising them both. Thunder already performed, she said. It did a quiet show. They ate dinner at the small table. Teo wasn't home yet. Work had borrowed him for an extra hour, but his presence lived in the fixed tap, the neatly labeled jars, the phone wallpaper where his cheek leaned into hers. The boys smeared soup on laughter, and Zara wiped their mouths with a tenderness that didn't need an audience. The knock had taken something from the air, and also returned something else, finality, perhaps, or the clean taste of a wound that has been properly washed. Later that night, after the boys surrendered to sleep, Zara stood by the window and watched the city glow in points. Somewhere, she knew, a man was finally learning the difficult grammar of remorse. She closed the curtains, whispered a grateful prayer, and slid into bed. The news cycle did what it always does. Wrung every drop from the story until only pulp remained. Clips were slowed down, subtitled, memed, argued over. Think pieces sprouted. On gendered blame and fertility, why Nigerian weddings are stages for pride, the quiet power of showing up. Some were thoughtful, most were content. For Cunnel, life narrowed to rooms with fewer chairs. A venture partner paused their agreement pending reputational clarity. A potential investor, once eager, now cited risk optics. Staff at his headquarters adopted the choreography of scandal. Sudden busyness when he entered, careful hellos, averted eyes. The receptionist, who used to beam when he arrived, now offered a polite, professional smile that said, "We will not discuss your trending tab." He met Mama Rahmath in his office, where success had been curated like a museum exhibit. Glass awards, heavy art, the smell of leather and ambition. She walked in slowly, the speed of someone carrying remorse in her bones. I came to repent, she said before sitting. He blinked. Mama. No, she raised a hand. Let me speak before pride interrupts. She folded her wrapper more tightly across her knees. I called that girl names in my mind. I wanted grandchildren so loudly, I could not hear God. I pushed you. I told you a wife is a womb first and a person second. I was wrong. Cunnel stared at his hands. I listened because it fed my arrogance. She nodded. Arrogance is a hungry child. It eats counsel that looks like meat. Her eyes searched his face. Have you seen a doctor? I have. He told her the truth. Saying it aloud was strangely relieving, as if the words themselves were medicine. It's me. She reached for his hand. He let her hold it. Then let us both learn smallness, she said. Let us both apologize, even if only to the wind. And if there is treatment, do it, not to win any race, but to be whole. He nodded. They sat without talking for a span long enough to remind them that love doesn't always need language. Outside, a staff member laughed at a joke and then hushed herself, embarrassed. Life, rude, magnificent life, continued to happen in every direction that wasn't his downfall. He began therapy the following week, a decision that felt like swimming upstream in a culture that often tells men to simply man up. He sat on a couch, peeled back 14 years of storytelling he had done about himself. First son, provider, unbreakable. He learned how not to interrupt. He learned to say, I was cruel, without adding a comma and an excuse. He messaged Femi late one night. Thank you for not leaving me alone with my noise. Femi replied, noise is for parties. I prefer friends. On Sunday, he attended church and sat in a back row where nobody asked him to give testimony. The sermon happened to be about the prodigal, not the son in a foreign land, but the elder brother who lived at home and still missed the point. He felt seen in a way that stung and healed. After the benediction, he slipped out before anyone could perform sympathy on him. At home, he passed the spare room where Zara had once folded his shirts with military neatness and whispered a simple apology to the air. It wasn't for her. He had already said those words to her face. but for the boy inside him who could finally admit he had been terribly, disastrously wrong. Morning at Aromi Kitchen smelled like redemption. Onions surrendering to hot oil, tomatoes easing into a simmer, peppers making their sharp announcements. Teo was under the sink again, determined to defeat a leaky joint that had chosen mischief as a hobby. Zara stirred okra in a swirl so consistent it could have been a metronome. The triplets took their posts on a mat in the corner with biscuits, toy cars, and the solemn purpose children bring to play. Crayfish? Teo asked from under the counter, voice echoing lightly. Blue container, second shelf, she replied, grinning before he even said, This kitchen is a lab. You're the chief scientist. Customers trickled in. A nurse on night duty with eyes like tired stars, an elderly man who always asked for extra pepper to wake my ancestors. 2 office colleagues who argued about football and united over stew. Zara moved with a rhythm learned from months of doing work that returns a blessing immediately. Serve, smile, receive thanks, pocket grace. Between orders, Teo emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth. He kissed her forehead quick and matter-of-fact, the kind of kiss that says we are a team. Pipe will behave now, he announced. At least until its next rebellion. She laughed. Then we will discipline it with spanner and love. A woman from the neighborhood paused at the doorway, hesitant, starstruck by a person she had only seen through a screen. Madam Zara? She asked softly. I just wanted to say, what you did, it gave me courage. She gestured vaguely, eyes shining. My mother-in-law has been calling me names. We're going to see a doctor together, me and my husband. Like adults. Zara stepped from behind the counter and hugged her. You're not alone, she said, and meant it. In the lull after the lunch rush, the boys crawled into their mother's lap one by one and demanded the story of how plantain got its name. She invented something cheeky, and they howled. Teo watched, leaning against the doorframe, a smile tucked into his beard. The peace in the room felt earned, like a grade you bled for. Evenings were for tidying and small dreams. They talked about painting a mural on the outer wall. Lola knew an artist. They talked about adding a breakfast menu. Teo made the best akra in 3 streets. They talked about savings and school fees and a weekend visit to the park where the boys could shout at ducks. At home, after baths and pajamas and the liturgy of bedtime stories, one son asked the question children ask when they sense a shape in the adult world. Mummy, are we famous? His brother added, Everyone says your name on your phone. Zara tucked them in, smoothing tiny curls. Fame is loud, she said. But peace is better. She held their gazes, one after the other. We are not famous. We are a family. That is bigger. When lights were out and quiet settled like a cat in the room, she slipped onto the sofa next to Teo. They said nothing for a while, sharing the kind of silence that tastes like water. He took her hand. Proud of you, he murmured, not about any viral clip, but about the work of staying soft in a hard world. Proud of us, she corrected, and rested her head on his shoulder. The news might still be chewing on their story, but in this house, the headline was simple. Peace returns where love does the dishes. It came in a plain white envelope, the sort used for bills or invitations to things you don't want to attend. The courier asked for a signature, left a scrawl, and disappeared. Zara wiped her hands on a towel and studied the handwriting, familiar, careful, the way someone writes when he wants to be taken seriously. She opened it at the counter with Lola watching from a stool, pretending not to hover. The paper inside was good, heavier than necessary. The note was brief. Thank you for your strength. Thank you for your forgiveness. You taught me what pride could never teach, humility. I lost a good woman. May your sons always know how proud they should be of you. I wish you peace. Cunnel. Lola sighed, low and complicated. Zara folded the letter along its crease and slid it into the drawer where she kept her prayer journal and the spare keys. It belongs there, she said simply. With other things I've given to God. What do you feel? Lola asked, genuinely curious. Zara thought. Not triumph, she said. Not bitterness. A quiet closing. She smiled, small and real. And gratitude. Later that evening, as the day exhaled and the restaurant lights went soft, Teo returned from a supply run with a sack of peppers and a grin that announced a bargain. She showed him the letter. He read it and nodded. Good, he said. Repentance is his work. Peace is ours. They ate on stools because the table had been claimed by dough rising under a cloth. The boys argued amiably about which of them would be a chef, a pilot, and a superhero with the power to make jollof appear at will. Zara listened, amused, thinking of all the definitions of abundance that did not involve money. Across town, the consequences of the non-wedding continued their slow, practical march. A supplier renegotiated unfavorably. A magazine profile was postponed indefinitely. Yet in the quiet of his study, Connell drafted a different set of documents. Apologies he would send privately to those he had maligned with his tongue. Zara's aunt, the pastor who had counseled patience, a driver he had dismissed cruelly in a rage years ago. Each message was a brick in a road he should have walked long before. He also placed another letter in an envelope addressed to Mama Rahmath. Not from son to mother, but from man to woman who had been wrong with him and wanted, like him, to be better. We will learn gentleness, he wrote, even if we learn it late. Back at Aromi kitchen, closing time arrived with its ordinary chores. Sweeping, wiping, counting, locking. Zara moved through them with the unthinking grace of routine. When she switched off the sign, the window reflected a family instead of a brand. Teo stacking crates, boys dozing against each other on a bench, Lola laughing into a voice note. Outside, a canta glowed. Inside, the last pot cooled. Zara looked at the drawer where the letter now rested and felt a strange, durable joy, the kind that doesn't spike, the kind that keeps. Some stories end with thunder. Hers, tonight, ended with dishes drying on a rack and a man humming as he carried his sons to bed. She turned the key in the door, slid her hand into Teo's, and stepped into a future that no longer owed pride a single coin. 1 month after the shattered wedding, Akanta had found new gossip, but the ripples of that day kept circling quietly through people's lives. The headlines had cooled, yet whenever anyone said truth, someone else whispered Zara. At Aromi kitchen, mornings returned to their soft rhythm. Pots clanging, Teo's laughter, the boys racing to see who could sweep faster with toy brooms. Between customers, Zara sometimes caught strangers peeking through the door just to look at her. The living proof that patience was not foolishness. Some came with stories. My sister was blamed for 10 years, one woman said, eyes shining. After your story, her husband went for tests. The issue was him. They're starting treatment. Zara smiled and prayed silently that their love would survive the truth. Yet even peace requires maintenance. Running the shop was hard work. Teo insisted she rest more, but she always found another pot to stir, another order to fill. You can't heal the world on an empty stomach, he teased one evening, guiding her to sit. Let dinner wait, she replied. Peace has appetite. They laughed, the sound rolling through the small restaurant like spice and stew. Across town, Connell began what he privately called the slow rebuild. He had sold one of his luxury cars and used the money to keep his staff paid. The old swagger in his walk had vanished. He greeted guards by name now, something they noted with wary surprise. On Sundays, he drove his aging mother to church and let her talk through guilt without rushing her silence. Sometimes he wrote letters he never sent, apologies to his younger self, promises to whatever mercy still listened. Pride, he discovered, was a heavy thing to bury. It kept trying to resurrect. Every night he replayed the moment Zara lifted their child and said, "You threw me away, but God filled my hands." It haunted him, but it also carved room for humility. Healing, he realized, is sometimes just the discipline of facing mirrors that don't flatter. And somewhere between regret and repentance, hope began to flicker again. Not for reunion, but for redemption. Saturday mornings were for markets, the smell of dried fish, the chatter of bargaining, the drumbeat of daily survival. Zara walked beside Lola, baskets swinging from their arms, 3 lively boys darting ahead shouting prices like miniature traders. These children have inherited your voice, Lola said, laughing. My voice sells better, Zara teased. At one stall, an elderly woman caught her wrist gently. You are the woman from the wedding, she said in Yoruba-tinged English. The one God defended. Zara blushed. I'm just a cook. No, the woman smiled. You are a sermon. They bought vegetables, fabrics, and stories. Lola whispered. Imagine if you opened another branch here. Half these people already know your face. Zara chuckled. Let's master one pot before stirring 2. Yet the seed of expansion had been planted. That same afternoon, back at the restaurant, Teo greeted a new visitor, Femi. He introduced himself politely. I'm an old friend of Connell's. May I speak with you, Mrs. Adebayo? His tone carried both caution and admiration. Zara wiped her hands and Saturday, of course. I came to thank you, he began. You exposed a truth many men are afraid to face. Connell is changing. Slowly, but honestly. I think your forgiveness saved his soul. She sighed. Forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for my peace. I understand, Femi said. Still, thank you. He left quietly, but his words lingered. That night she told Teo about the visit. Strange, she mused. How kindness can reach through ruins. Teo smiled. That's the point of grace, it travels. Rain arrived like overdue mercy, washing dust from rooftops, turning Akanta's chaos into soft percussion. Zara loved rainy days. They slowed the world enough for gratitude to catch up. Business was slower, so she let the boys draw on old cardboard boxes while Teo strummed his guitar, a hobby he resurrected after marriage. He sang playful lines about stew and love, about second chances tasting like plantain. Zara joined with laughter between lyrics. One day we'll record this and go viral for joy instead of scandal, she joked. Mid-song, the power flickered out. They lit candles, the boys cheering at the magic lights. In that golden flicker, Zara watched her husband's face, steady, kind, the opposite of the coldness she once endured. Gratitude filled her chest like warm tea. Teo, she said softly, thank you for teaching me gentle love. He set the guitar aside. Thank you for letting me. Outside, rain hammered the street, but inside was music. Every drop felt like punctuation in a long letter of healing written by time itself. Across town, Kunnel sat by his window watching the same rain. The drops streaked down like unhurried forgiveness. He whispered a short prayer, for Zara's happiness, for his own discipline, for sons who might someday be born if grace allowed. For now, he contented himself with being better than yesterday. Months turned into a year. The triplets grew taller and rowdier, their laughter spilling across a roomy kitchen like music customers came to expect with their meals. Lola's tailoring shop next door became the unofficial daycare. She claimed the noise helped her sew faster. Business blossomed. Zara hired 2 assistants, painted the walls bright yellow, and hung a small sign above the door, Taste of Grace. Underneath, smaller letters read, because every story deserves flavor. One afternoon, a journalist visited for a feature on women who rebuilt. She asked, "What kept you standing when life collapsed?" Zara thought before answering. "Faith. And people who refused to let me drown in silence. Also work. There's healing in doing something with your hands." The article went viral again, but this time without scandal. Comments celebrated resilience, not gossip. When the boys saw her photo online, they clapped. "Mummy, you're famous again. Then we'll use fame to feed more people," she said. Meanwhile, Kunnel expanded a charity he had quietly founded, the Zara Foundation for Women's Health. He never asked for her permission to use the name, but he sent a formal letter explaining that it was an act of restitution, not exploitation. She read it, nodded, and chose not to reply. Some apologies don't need conversation, only sincerity. That night, Teo found her reading the letter. "Does it bother you?" he asked. "No," she said, smiling faintly. "It means the wound has turned into something that feeds others. I can live with that." On the second birthday of Taste of Grace, the street filled with drums and laughter. Lola organized it, of course. She believed every success deserved a festival. Customers old and new arrived bearing flowers, gifts, and stories. The smell of jollof and fried fish danced through the air. Zara wore white this time, simple, radiant, unburdened. During the toast, Teo lifted a glass of Zobo. "To beginnings that looked like endings," he said. The crowd cheered. The triplets banged spoons on tables, chanting, "Mummy! Mummy!" Zara laughed until tears blurred her sight. Later, when the crowd thinned and night draped Akanta in soft blue, she stood outside the restaurant. Lights shimmered on puddles. Distant music from another party floated through the air. She remembered her first night walking out of Kunnel's house, alone, terrified, whispering, "My God will fight for me." He had. Not with thunder, but with time. At that exact hour, in another part of the city, Kunnel closed his laptop after finalizing a hospital sponsorship program. He poured himself water, not wine, and toasted the silence. Pride was buried, but purpose had risen. Zara returned inside, kissed each sleeping boy, and found Teo on the couch reading. He looked up. "What are you thinking about?" "That miracles aren't loud," she said. "They just keep growing." He smiled, pulled her close. "Then ours is still growing." Outside, rain began again, soft, steady, abundant. Zara listened, heart full, and whispered the last line of her story. What they called barrenness, God renamed overflow.